Scott, long before Donald Trump uttered the word Greenland or Iran came up the way it has come up now, he mentioned a word Bagram base. And he also talked about the desire to get back the American weaponry that he says was left behind because of the hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan. And he blames the former president for that. Is there really an appetite in the U.S. And beyond USA in Europe to hear more about Afghanistan? I mean, it has been going on for such a long time. There seems to be a policy compassion and attention fatigue there.
Most of the public in the West is tired about hearing about the war in Afghanistan after 20 years and after the way that war ended, to be honest. But you do see a growing appetite to discuss engagement with Afghanistan, in policy circles particularly. The war with Iran has strained America's relationships with the Gulf states, and access to more bases in the region is seen as a long-term imperative. The opportunity to normalize relationships with the Taliban and support their state structure does provide the opportunity for America to re-access things like Bagram Air Base, which is seen as a long-term strategic asset for the United States. This is something where Trump's transactional nature actually makes him uniquely qualified to pursue a transactional opportunity.
Transactional opportunity, will that happen after the Iran deal is signed or not signed, or can it happen simultaneously to what the Trump administration is dealing with? Because that's crucial. To mark something on the chart is one thing, but to act on it is quite another.
Theoretically, they could be done in parallel, but the amount of folks that Trump trusts in his cabinet to represent him and make informed decisions appears to be shrinking drastically. It doesn't appear likely that America is going to be able to engage Afghanistan in a meaningful diplomatic way on any level while simultaneously pursuing an end to the war with Iran.
Kathy, if I were to ask you to respond to this, should the world worry what's happening inside Afghanistan? Because, again, referring to the same report that that was played out of Beirut, you mentioned that the things are happening there. There are groups gathering and a network of sorts. Not your word, but I'm inferring from what you said are coming up.
Sure.
Should the world really worry what's happening in Afghanistan at this point in time?
Yes. Yes, the short answer is yes, Talat. And the reason, and Afghans are worried, and Pakistanis are worried. And the United States, between 1996 and 2001, adopted a strategy of isolation in Afghanistan. The result, 9/11. Because there was they were blinded. And there was a lot of activity that they're aware of, and a lot of activity that those among the Taliban weren't even able to control or themselves were aware of, parts of the Taliban. So yes, there's a tremendous amount happening in Afghanistan that also worries Afghans and worries Pakistanis. And isolating the Taliban, isolating Afghanistan, or isolating the Taliban, rather, isolates the 42 million people in Afghanistan. And to be very clear, of all the embassies that are in Afghanistan today, none of them but Russia accepts and recognizes the Taliban. None of them. International law, however, does say that any government that has control of over 80 or 90% of its territory is, in fact, the de facto government, whether you choose to recognize it or you choose not to. So being inside Afghanistan has just a host of benefits in terms of access to people, on-the-ground knowledge, travel, able to get a feel for what is going on, get to interact. To be very clear, the United States doesn't even interact with the Taliban from Doha. I mean, there is the intelligence, of course, the occasional forays, but there is a ruling that does not allow them to interact with them. If you can't talk to people that you're having disagreements with, what can you talk about? And in terms of Bagram, to negotiate Bagram with the Taliban know how to negotiate. People have to remember, they negotiated that deal last time Trump was in power. And that was those who were involved in the negotiations, including Zalmay Khalilzad, was very clear when he said the Taliban would come in with files this high, filled with papers and things they wanted to ask and demand. And so they're not pushovers in terms of negotiation. So it would be well to understand who they are, and to get back into Afghanistan, because according to UN reports, Talat, and you could say, well, that's members contributing, but nonetheless, there's a cacophony, a whole constellation of militant groups inside Afghanistan, whether it's the Islamic State, the Al-Qaeda in the Asian subcontinent, the Open of Uzbekistan, the Turkestan, the Uyghurs, and a lot of smaller groups, including some of the Iranian groups, Jandula, the new group that has replaced Jandula, and a number of smaller groups that are also there. And also, of course, they're also in, some of those are also in Pakistan. So there is a lot of really good, smart reasons why the United States and other Western countries do not follow the same failed strategy that the U.S. followed between 1996 and 2001 when the Taliban were last in power.
Thank you very much, Kathy. This is very, very useful, this debate, and Scott Kelly for your insightful and incisive comments. We take a break here. The topic is still on. After the break, I'm going to take you to Beirut in Lebanon, where Sahil is ready with his panelists, and I think a report as well on the same subject. Welcome to Redline Global's special edition. Welcome to viewers from the Middle East, South Asia, Southwest Asia, and elsewhere in the world. Two of our studios are live, and we are talking about Afghanistan. Just to give you a sense of how important this issue is for Pakistan, in the last nearly 11 months, there have been almost 900 attacks, terrorist attacks inside Pakistani territory. Nearly 95% of them emanated from Afghanistan. The rest of the 5% had the support of the groups inside Afghanistan. In terms of how many terrorists were killed, about 1,400 terrorists were knocked out. Equal number of civilians and military and police personnel have lost their lives. So there is a headache that Pakistan is dealing with. Policy parameters have changed. It's a no-nonsense policy. Red lines are clearly drawn. But it's not just a headache and a challenge for Pakistan. It's a challenge that goes beyond Afghanistan. You heard Kathy Gannon talk about the world taking its eye off Afghanistan and the consequences of that failed policy. Let me now take you to Lebanon, where Sahil is ready with his panelists and a report as well. Over to you, Sahil.
Thank you, Talat. And it was a spellbinding conversation between you, Scott, and Kathy, especially when Kathy mentioned about how we all should be worried. It's not just Pakistan or Afghanistan or India or South Asia for that matter, but the whole world as a whole. Now let's bring in Giorgio Safiero, CEO at Gulf State Analytics. He's joining me from Washington. And we also have Withering Fellow in International Relations and Security from the University of Loughborough, Afzal Ashraf, who joins me from London. Let's begin by discussing what's happening when it comes to isolation. In our previous discussion, we did hear Kathy Gannon pointing out that isolating Kabul or isolating Taliban is not just isolating Taliban, but also 45 million people of Afghanistan. So in this international isolation of Taliban, is this punishing the regime or is this punishing the Afghan people? And does anyone have a better answer? First, we'll begin with you, Giorgio.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful to be on your program. I think that today, in 2026, when we talk about the quote-unquote isolation of the Taliban government in Kabul, we need to understand that the isolation is very relative. Yes, it's true that there's only one state in the entire world, Russia, which formally recognizes the Taliban. But in practice, what we see are really all the countries in the immediate neighborhood engaging the Taliban one way or another. The Central Asian republics, especially Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, they have not formally recognized the Taliban like Russia has, but they have very deep ties with the Taliban, and they engage Kabul very closely. The same can be said about China and the Taliban, Iran and the Taliban, GCC countries, especially the UAE and the Taliban. So I would just push back on this idea that the Taliban is isolated globally right now.
So when we talk about international isolation, we also talk about sanctions, we talk about the lack of embassies, and I think in that context, what you're saying makes sense. And also, I'm just again recalling what Kathy said, because that really left an indelible mark, because if you isolate a regime, how do you decide whether it's the regime being isolated or the population, something that we've also seen happening in other countries such as Iran. Now, the Taliban present a united front publicly, but there are known fault lines between pragmatists who want international recognition and hardliners who answer literally to no one. Now, how deep are those divisions, and is there any scenario of Zil where they become impossible to contain?
Well, it's an important question that you ask, and I'm afraid there's no really easy answer to this. The problem with isolation, as has been described, I think, very well, is that it's there in an official capacity. The sanctions that you highlighted are critical. So while it's true that a lot of states do contact with the Taliban, certainly at an operational, at an economic level, it is difficult to develop the country because of sanctions. And those sanctions primarily enforced by the Taliban regime, that not only is aid not allowed, but many of the funds the Taliban or Afghanistan entitled were friend and died to others. What we have is a problem that exists in international relations that's magnified in the Gulf of Afghanistan is a problem where international relations, the relationship between states, real and it therefore amoral. It has a moral component, but the society at large within the United States in general and elsewhere, it cares about people, it cares about morality. And so we have sanctioned the regime which knowingly hurt the public, and there's no state level initiative to try and overcome the inherent injustice in this system. The assumption that the American government and other Western governments will make that either the public, the Afghan public, should rise up and replace the regime, which of course is impractical, or that the regime is therefore responsible for the suffering of its own people, regardless of the fact that those sanctions have been put on them by these states. So there is no or optimistic prospect of this situation getting better. If anything, it's likely to get worse with the Pakistani policies and to some degree the Iranian policies of repatriation of Afghan refugees who are adding to the burden economically as well as in other ways on the Taliban regime.